Jen, do you want to start by introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm Jen Wall. I am first and foremost Zach's mom. I am John's wife, and I am the co-founder and executive director of Zach's Bridge. I am a pediatric palliative care social worker by training. I actually went back to school after Zach passed away in 2022. He passed away in 2021, but I started school the next year because I was so profoundly affected by the holistic care that our family received during Zach's cancer journey. I also have a small role at Dana-Farber as a parent peer navigator. Dana-Farber is the Cancer Institute in Boston where Zach was treated. And I am also the co-leader of the pediatric special interest group for the Social Work Palliative Hospice Network, which is an organization that brings together palliative care social workers in the US and Canada to share resources and do a whole bunch of things. And I am no stranger to the hospital world. I started my career as a hospital and nonprofit administrator for many years. And I've always been comfortable in this space. I'm the daughter of a retired pediatrician.
And so I'm John. I am Zach's dad, first and foremost, Jen's husband and the co-founder and president. Jen and I both do this full time, which is amazing. It's also, sometimes challenging working with your spouse, but that's another session for another time. But no, we love to do this work. We wish we were never doing it. But it is amazing because Jen has a great set of skills around healthcare and psychosocial care. And then I have 30 years of business experience to apply to what we're doing. I also have a role at Dana-Farber where I serve on the Pediatric Patient Family Advisory Council, and I am the co-leader of a virtual support group for dads from an organization called Momcology. Most people have heard of Momcology, but not everybody's heard of Dadcology. But we've been doing Dadcology for about 2 years, and any cancer dad at any stage can join us. We do two meetings a month, one Tuesday and one Saturday, and that's about us. But let's start and tell you a little bit about our journey and a little bit about Zach. Oh, Jen brought one of our ungrateful employees into the mix as well. So that on the slides is us with Zach. Zach on our Make a Wish trip in October of 2021. Zach was diagnosed with osteosarcoma bone cancer in January of 2021 during COVID. He had a 6-inch tumor about the size of a hot dog bun below his left knee, and he was metastatic from the start. None of his treatments worked. His surgeries didn't work. And Zach was really coming into his own at that point and making good groups of friends and just becoming just a really interesting young man. He passed away when he was 16 and a half in November of 2021, and we miss him every single day. But during that journey, when we were told he was terminal, we had already had known that news, and we started to work with the palliative care team here. I put my head in my hands on that first meeting. I had a big, ugly cry. Now, not every dad cries, but I cried a lot, right? And I continued to, miss him and all that. But this was different. This was really a pivotal moment for us, for a whole variety of reasons. But we were switching from, curative care to a palliative approach, and we only had 139 days left. Everything that happened during that 139 days and everything after is what we're here to talk to you about tonight. During those 139 days from those late stage into the end, everybody's told us, "Oh, you have anticipatory grief." We said, "Yeah, absolutely, that makes sense." I didn't know what anticipatory grief was, but when they explained it, it made sense to us, right? We were anticipating the death and loss of our loved one and all the things he was never going to be able to do, we were never going to be able to do with him, all the changes to the world around us. But the other things that people don't really seem to talk about is the fact that we changed fundamentally in those moments. We Just who we were, how Jen and I related to each other, how we related to Zach, how we related to our friends, our family, our colleagues, all the things going on in the world. In a heartbeat, we were fundamentally different. And we didn't know why. We just knew that it was going on and it was happening and it was weird and it was horrible, but it was going on. Right. And the other thing that was going on during that time for us is we had questions about what can we do to make it easier for our family, easier for Zach, reduce his pain, just, and try to just do things so, to just create more memories and not have to struggle as much along the way. And we looked for people to talk to, not our medical team, because we could talk to them, not our friends and family, they were available, but people that had gone through it, that had gone ahead of us and been able to experience this. And we wanted to connect with them, and we couldn't find those people. And that for us was really hard. Eventually we got connected to people, but they didn't have the right training and background. And, it didn't really help as much as it could have. We didn't want to give up hope, but we really wanted to, understand what was going to happen, right? And make the most of the time that we had left. Because we learned right early on is that when you have a survival diagnosis, your journey isn't really a straight line. But that blue bar, psychosocial and peer support, is present at all the different stages along the way. But what we found is when you have that late stage diagnosis and bereavement, right? When you're in that late stage, those red dots there, you have all these questions, things about palliative care and hospice and tissue donation and all these things that you never really want to ask. You can really get good answers because people don't have that lived experience, and we don't want anybody to have that lived experience. But we had questions and questions that we needed to have one-to-one conversations with people that had gone through it, and there wasn't anybody for us, and that carried over into bereavement. Even though we were treated at one of the best cancer hospitals in the United States, and there was a bereavement group, it wasn't cancer specific. And we couldn't get into it for like 3 months, right? Maybe it was going to be full. Who could we talk to, right? We weren't ready to post everything on Facebook. Some people can do that. We didn't want to do that. We couldn't find our people. And so we saw this gap in what was going on. And we said, well, we can solve this. We want to take our lived experience and that of all these other people that we've talked to and experienced and bridge that gap in the continuum of care by connecting people with other people that have gone through it. And when we started to meet the OPAC team, we were just so amazed by all the things OPAC has done to provide care and support for families that are in the hospital, in treatment, in survivorship, right? But we know there's still greater opportunities to work together, right, and support families like some of us here on this call tonight, right? So that's why we formed Zaxbridge, to bridge that gap. Now, as the more we talk and the more you get to know Zach loves supercars. He loved Maseratis and Ferraris and Lamborghinis, and he also loved animals. Anything that would go over a bridge, 100% Zach approved. So that's the other reason we're called Zach's Bridge. So that's what we did. So Zach passed away, unfortunately, nearly 5 years ago, and we spent all of 2022 trying to figure out what we were going to do. We want to do something unique and different that built on our lived experience and help people in a way that no one else was doing anywhere else in the world. So we launched Zaxbridge here in the United States in early 2023 to provide one-to-one peer support from trained, experienced peers that have gone through a cancer journey for late-stage and bereaved pediatric cancer parents and caregivers. At the end of the day, we're in the business of providing connection and compassion for people that can't find it any other way when it's needed most. And that's really what we do. So I've talked a lot. Jen, do you want to introduce this video?
Sure. I was going to say you did talk a lot, and John and I can talk about Zaxbridge all day long. There are people on this call who've heard us talk about it in depth, but as much as you could hear us talk about it, and John and I are the original two Zaxbridge peers and continue to be active peers today. Hearing from two of our support seekers tells a much more meaningful story. So you're going to hear from Angelica, who is Lainey's mom. Lainey died about 1.5 years ago, and Lainey lives in Tucson, Arizona, and her peer mentor lives in Chicago. And then you're going to hear from Rick. Rick is a dad who lives in the San Francisco area, and his peer mentor lives in Massachusetts. And I highlight that because everything we do is 100% virtual. Some of that came out of John and I and Zach experiencing cancer during the pandemic. But some of it's also the reality of a pediatric cancer journey. Going somewhere in person, showing up for something isn't always realistic. And we wanted it to be as easy as possible for parents and caregivers to access peer support through us.
My daughter's name is Elena Laney Sharp.
My daughter's name was Tallulah Zetterreker.
Laney was 14 years old when she passed away.
She was 12 years old when she passed.
After the passing of Laney, it was really hard to navigate a life without her.
I felt very alone and hopeless and rudderless, like everything that I'd worked for my whole life had been taken away.
Elena's social worker connected me with Zaxbridge, and I reached out and immediately got a call back. My first initial call when I spoke with Jen, it felt like talking with a peer. Jen knew exactly how I was feeling, and then she connected me with Cindy, and I've found comfort in knowing that they feel a lot of the same ways I feel.
I'd gone through a number of therapists and psychologists that were available to me, but none of them really understood what we were going through. And it really made all the difference in the world to talk to another bereaved parent who really got it. What I like about talking to my mentor at Zaxbridge is he's just a good listener. And he really understands what's going on.
I can message her right away if I'm having a really bad day, or even if I'm having a good day and I'm feeling like I want to share a memory or something.
I wouldn't hesitate to engage with Zaxbridge. The impact to your life, your work, your relationships, your friendships, and your marriage can't really be overstated. And it's scary sometimes to put yourself out there, but you will need more help than you think. And Zaxbridge has been incredibly helpful for me.
I always recommend Zaxbridge for other parents that I've come in contact with that are bereaved as well. Having someone to talk to about what I was going through and experiencing has been nothing short of a blessing.
Jen, do you want to share a little bit more about Angelica's journey?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the most interesting thing about Angelica is that Angelica has now raised her hand and is going to become a peer mentor with Zaxbridge as well. She's going to attend our next peer training. And that to me is probably the most meaningful part, is that clearly, she's been so affected by the support that she received from her mentor, Cindy, that she would like to turn around and do the same thing. She said, I'm happy to go to the training and I'm happy to be a peer mentor, but if it means that I can't have a peer mentor anymore, that's a deal breaker. And so the answer is always, yes, you can be a peer mentor and a support seeker at the same time. As bereaved parents, we are always support seekers. That doesn't change. And so sometimes having a peer mentor as well as being a peer mentor can be just as therapeutic. Many of our peers, including John and I, would tell you that it is as therapeutic in our grief journey to give support as it can be to receive that support.
Absolutely. Another interesting thing about Angelica is a couple of weeks after we started working with Angelica, Angelica's husband reached out and got connected with his own peer mentor. And after a couple of meetings, he said to his peer mentor, he said, I'm only here because my wife made me do this, but I'm so happy I did. And that happens all the time. It happens all the time where wives and partners bring in their other partner, right? We have dads that start and bring in moms. We've had two divorced couples that have recommended to their ex that they go join Zaxbridge. Everybody's different, and we have plenty of people. Like in the case of Rick, we've never met his wife, right? And that's okay. Everybody's different, and people need multiple things. Some people need one thing. Everybody needs something unique. But if I go back to Angelica's husband, Tony, and Rick for a second, you're probably surprised when I tell you that 30% of our support seekers are dads. 30% of our peer mentors are dads, right? Dads need support too. Every time we talk to clinical teams, they're like, what? No way. Like nobody believes it, but it's true, right? And talking about this one-to-one, particularly for dads, can be a much safer, more comfortable way to do it, because it's really on their schedule. And Jen will talk about that in a little bit as well. In fact, she'll talk about that right now as we talk about how Zaxbridge works.
So we structured Zaxbridge partially as a result of some of the frustrations that we experienced in trying to find peer support during our journey. So we aim for a rapid intake and matching for a connection as quickly as possible. Parents can self-refer to Zaxbridge. There's a very easy form to complete on our website. Care teams can also refer parents and caregivers using that same form. What we just ask is that if a friend or family member learns about Zaxbridge, that they tell that person about it. They're not completing the form themselves. I do all of the intakes. If a dad is interested, or as John said, is being dragged along, he joins me for the intake. And we have a conversation. We may talk about their child, depending on if they're feeling like they can. But the most important part of that conversation is around matching. The special sauce of Zaxbridge is the power of the peer relationship. And so I always ask our new support seeker, what would be something important to connect on with your peer mentor? And the answers that I get fall into three very distinct buckets. The first is about type of cancer. I'd really like a peer mentor whose child has similar or same type of cancer. I can't necessarily match on exact, phenotype of lymphoma or the exact type of brain tumor, but very different going through a leukemia journey versus a sarcoma or a brain tumor journey. But sometimes that's too close, and what will happen is that the peer and the support seeker will start talking about this treatment and that treatment, and it turns into this, oh, did your child have this reaction? And that's not helpful for either of them. The second is around the age of child. Of the peer's child. It's very different to parent a toddler versus a teenager through cancer. The third is a little bit of a catch-all. I call it family dynamics, and it does include things like, I have surviving children. I'm a single parent. We have multiple parents who are parents of twins, because that's a unique experience to go through. But that category also will include things such as faith. We are a non-denominational and non-spiritual program, but we have had support seekers as well as peer mentors who indicate that their faith was a very strong component of their cancer journey. And if it's important to them, that's something that we're happy to match on. I answer all intakes as soon as I can. I'm sending out a text to connect in minutes to hours. If it's not hours, it's a day or two. It's not weeks, it's not months, because we know when someone reaches out for support, they want support. They don't want to wait. I then connect our peer mentor and support seeker directly, and they then go and have a conversation. But it can be that even though something looks like it's right on paper, personalities don't always click. And so they don't have to have an awkward moment at the end of that first conversation and say, this doesn't feel right. I check in with each of them separately. And if either of them feels for any reason that it doesn't feel like a good match, we go back to the list. We right now have 35 trained peer mentors. We are about to have more. We're about to do a training next month. And so there's lots of options for people. Our peer mentors and our support seekers then decide together what kind of cadence they would like in terms of meeting. Some of our support seekers like to have a scheduled time that they meet with their peer mentor, whether it's once a week, once every couple of weeks, once a month, whatever it is. Some like to have one of them called more of an as-needed peer relationship. This is really important at times if someone's in bereavement, because we all know what the end of that cancer journey can feel like. And you're sitting in a waiting room and your scanxiety is through the roof while you wait for test results. And you just want to check in with someone who gets it. But they decide together and they touch base. Our peers all go through training. The first training is the modules that you see on the right side of the screen. We deliver the training in 3 different ways. In person is always our preference. I promise if we come up to Ontario, we are not going to try and stay, but we would love to be Canadian citizens given our own country at the moment. The second way we do our peer training is virtually in real time. So next month we'll be doing a training that is taking place on a Saturday. We usually do them on weekends because we know people have busy lives, and we do that on Zoom. And it's either any of the options are relatively interactive, but that gives us a chance to go through all the training modules that you see on the right. And we do role play, and our peers get to know each other a little bit as well. The third option for people who can't do an in-person training or attend a live training is we do have a learning management system where we can do asynchronous work as well. That's not the end of training. We learn something from every training we do. Last month, our in-person training participants asked for more role play time. So last week, Jon and I did a virtual role play session online. We invited all of our peers to it in case people wanted a little bit of a refresher. And so people could come and do more role plays. But we also meet with our peers every 12 weeks. And that gives us a chance to check in. It gives them a chance to get to know each other. We often bring in special guests. We give updates on what's going on in Zaxbridge. And we also give our peers a chance to present some of their interactions. So at our last peer follow-up session, we had the two mentors who are mentoring a couple. They themselves are not a couple. They don't even know each other. Present some of their interactions about mom and dad. And it was really interesting to see the difference between how mom and dad are processing grief and the kinds of things that they're talking about with their peer mentor. Jon, did I miss anything?
No, I think you covered it really well. I mean, I think one of the training is really important, and the ongoing training is very different than other peer mentor programs that we're familiar with. And I think also the fact that connections can happen when they need to happen. They aren't like, oh, you can only talk to somebody, for 3 months or 12 times or whatever. Grief, we don't control when grief happens, right? We don't control when to talk to somebody about it. And knowing that somebody's there, some people need multiple conversations. Some people have been talking to for, over a year. Some people just want one or two. Everybody's different, right? And having that flexibility to meet people where they are when they need it is so important, right? And that really, that really matters, right? We think a lot about peer support, not only at the stages that we're looking at here, but the red dots where we're talking about, but across the board. In fact, we recommend other peer support programs. If people come to us and like, oh, I need something, but if they're in a different stage, we want to recommend that. But I think there's other things that happen here as well. Like, who's running the organization? Is it hospital led? Is it community led? Like OPAC is, right? Is it, who facilitating the group? Is it a licensed professional? Is it trained peer? Is it just someone who has limited experience? And so many people we know want different options. Some people will only talk to us from a peer support perspective. They're not ready for groups. They don't want to do anything in person. They can't go. They don't want to post publicly on Facebook about something. Some people want to do that and go to the retreats and go to everything, anything they can. Everybody's different overall. The thing that we're starting to see here, unfortunately, is that cost is starting to become a factor. Programs that used to be free, that had free grief groups, are now not necessarily free as well. And obviously Jen talked about all the needs of the support seekers. It's so important that everybody who's involved in that, and that's why we're so grateful for the connection with the OPAC team, helps people get the thing they need, not just a thing, right, that's at the right stage. It's what matches that support seekers need at that point in time overall. And so we're very much committed to doing that. And we've thought about this idea, a little bit more. Actually, even if someone comes to our website and they're not ready for support from us, and not everybody is ready for one-to-one peer support, we said, well, what happens if they're there and they want to find something that could be relevant to their late stage or bereavement journey? Wouldn't it be great if we had a list of resources? And everybody says, everybody has a list of resources. We don't need any more list of resources. They're all alphabetical. They're all out of date. Don't do it. And we said, hold on. We want to think about this a little bit differently. Maybe there's a better way of doing it. So we created something that we call the Zaxbridge Resource Explorer. So this has been out for a little over a year. Currently, we only have organizations that are based in the United States, but with help from the OPAC team, the OPAC community, we absolutely can build this out to support Canada as well. But it's the only resource that we're aware of that has 130 resources for those late stage, those pre-bereaved and bereaved families overall. The thing that's interesting about it is it's not alphabetical. Hey, we're biased. We're Zaxford. We're at the bottom of that list. We don't want that, right? But everything we have in there is ranked and scored. And we look at really three things. Do we have a relationship with the organization? Is the website clean and clear? Can we figure out what they do? And do we know somebody that's worked with them? Do we trust them? So if when you're in that moment where you need something, you don't have to go through 100 things. You don't have to go through 500 things. The things that we know and trust are at the top of the list. It's not to say that things that are lower aren't as good, but it's just really important that that people find things that we believe can help them overall. So we're absolutely want to talk with this community about extending this, and it's not much work for us to add those things in and make it super easy to find things that are relevant to you, no matter where you are. That's really important. The other thing we've done is we have gotten a grant from a pharmaceutical company to build out things to let people kind of save their searches, share their searches, and we even added in the ability. We've taken more than 200 books on grief and loss from pediatric cancer hospitals and put them in there. And we use artificial intelligence now to recommend those books to people overall. So that's kind of where we are with that. We're almost just wrapping up. I think we're very proud of the number of states and soon to be multiple provinces, in this overall. In Canada, we have one trained peer mentor already, and we have 3 support seekers. We just took on a new support seeker from Canada just this week, a couple days ago, right? So we're really looking to partner with OPAC and this community to find people that both need support, which you can do today, right? Or give support, right? Or do both, because it's a unique resource and something that bereaved parents really haven't had access to. So we're thrilled that we're in 27 states, in Ontario already. We've also helped a mom in France and a dad in Japan. We're doing some real-time translation of Spanish and French, but we always need people that speak other languages as well. So if people secretly speak Spanish, for example, that's even a bonus because we get a lot of Spanish speakers looking for support as well. Overall, and Sam, I'm looking at you. Since the last time we talked, these numbers are probably much bigger than we talked a number of months ago. We just crossed the 100 people helped line. That feels like a really big number, but it's also a really tiny number, right? It's a fraction of the people in the United States. About 3,000 kids will die every year from pediatric cancer. I don't know the numbers in Canada off the top of my head, but all those kids have 2 parents, almost all in some way, right? All those people need support, right? And not everybody's eligible for it or wants it or can access it, but they all need it. So the fact that we've come into this area where it's very challenging and there's been nothing, and to cross that 100 individual threshold, we're really proud of, right? We talked about where we are already. Since we started tracking these connections in early 2025, we've had more than 600 connections. A connection can be a time a peer mentor connects with a support seeker in a phone call, in a video chat, a day of texting, 600 times. The average amount of time they spend, 39 minutes. These aren't quick little things. Some of them can be. Some of them, hey, I'm just checking in. How you doing? What's going on? Right? Or I'm having a tough day, right? Whatever it is. But 39 minutes, that's a lot of time, right? We have a lot of things to talk about. We're not always talking about grief, but we're always talking about the things that surround grief, right? Because everything is different. Your relationship with your friends, if you have other kids, work, right? All the things, and all this is almost always one-on-one, because quite honestly, we can tell you that parents that are doing both getting individual peer support, we talk about the other person too, because sometimes these relationships change and they're hard. And that's the reality. We're not marriage counselors or relationship counselors anyway, but we just talk about life dealing with grief, right? And we're on pace to double and grow compared in 2026 compared to what we did in 2025, and we expect to double again in 2027. Just to close out, I think very much like OPAC, we're built from lived experience, right? And there's nobody else that's really doing exactly what we're doing. It's focused on the community that we're focused on, and the ability that we have to form those rapid connections really makes a difference when people are really in need of support when they need it overall. So we've talked a lot. What we will do is on our website, there's a whole bunch of resources. There's the referral form. If you want to get support, you can become a peer mentor. You can get access to the Resource Explorer, get answers to frequently asked questions. Please, if you're not sure, if you want to contact us, have ideas, we would love to talk to you, because it's so important that we work together to support people that have gone through the things that so many of us unfortunately have here overall. I'm going to stop sharing Zach, and we can open up to any questions, comments, feedback. I don't know if people can just want to chat or put comments, unmute and ask as well. We have a small group, so if we want to talk, let's do it.
Thank you, Jon and Jen, first of all. Thank you so much for that great presentation. And if you want to, anybody here wants to chat or has any questions, feel free to speak up or to type your question in the chat. Anything to start with? Sam?
Hi, Sam.
Hi,
No
guys.
heckling, Sam.
No heckling. I am curious because I think OPAC would probably be able to speak to this as well. When it comes to being a parent-led organization, trying to build relationships with social workers, hospitals. I know, Jen, obviously you have the inside scoop on that track, but in general, as you grow Zaxbridge, what are some of the ways that you're able to make those connections with clinicians, not so much clinicians, social workers, in a way that the social workers, for lack of a better word, are open and want to learn about what you're doing, because we all know that they're not doing what you're doing. Sometimes I'm not sure they know that they're not doing what you're doing. And so I ask at this because I'd like to find ways to talk about Zaxbridge more with the clinicians that I meet here in Canada. And I just would love to hear sort of your language around it in a way that invites more social workers to be curious and want to know what you're doing, not be threatened by it, not try to mimic or do what you're doing, but just be open to what you're offering.
Jon, do you want me to start?
Yeah, you start.
Well, so there's a couple of things here to sort of address. I think in a lot of ways, they either don't want to address this portion, or there's not access to doing that. I've talked to so many parents and social workers and nurses who, the minute their child dies, whether it's in the hospital or in the home, that's the end of the relationship. And so a lot of parents don't know to go back to their social worker if they are bereaved and say, I need this support. They see this like, oh, my child's gone. I'm no longer going to the hospital every day. That's the end of all these people who supported me and knew me. I'm not supposed to go there anymore. My child has passed away. Why would I continue to access that? If there is a bereavement program in place, that can be a bit of a bridge. But the problem with that at times can be that parents may see communications that they're getting from the hospital and want nothing to do with it because it's too much of a reminder, and it's just too much. Many times we do briefings all the time. We go to conferences, we talk about Zaxbridge. More than once, because I still am on some of the bereaved parent boards on Facebook, I have reached out to someone, and said, this is what we do. I don't do it publicly. I send a private message and they respond. And Jon and I meet with them if it's a couple, and they say, oh, my social worker told me about Zaxbridge. My palliative social worker told me about Zaxbridge. But this is where the power of the parent organization is so key. Something about the fact that I, as a parent, reached out to this person was the reason why they finally said, yes, I want that support. So I think there's a really important piece here of how integral parents who have experienced this are to getting the support in place. I think one of the other pieces of it, I don't know that it's fear as much. One of the things that Jon and I do is we also speak about our journey. We talk about Zaxbridge during that, but it's not just about Zaxbridge. And so we've now spoken at 2 different nursing conferences. And we also spoke at pediatric grand rounds for one of the medical schools here in Massachusetts. And at the end of the talk, a medical student came over to me and said, you know, I've been thinking about palliative care, but after listening to you and Jon, I'm really thinking about pediatric palliative care as a specialty now.
Wow.
And I mention that because here are people who have not formed their opinions. They haven't been practicing social work, medicine, whatever it is for 10, 20, 30 years, and they're still open to new ideas. And so, you know, the idea of being able to get in when people are students, whether they're nursing students, social work students, medical students. You know, I had a conversation with a very old friend today who was a psychologist, and she was like, if you could develop a curriculum that would give continuing medical education credits to people where you're talking about the journey and about what Zaxbridge is, you're getting to people who are still learning, and they haven't formed all of their opinions. They're not, you know, really experienced clinicians who think they know the answers to everything. We hear time and time again, it's really hard for social workers or palliative social workers to get in the room with when it's an oncology case, because there's a lot of gatekeeping by the oncology team. And there, you know, people are afraid to mention Zaxbridge because we're bereaved parents, you know, and the reason we started Zaxbridge was because when we looked for this and couldn't find it, we were told time and again, we don't want to match you with a parent who's lost a child because you will lose hope. We never, ever want a family to lose hope. But this is such an isolating time that the more support you can receive, the better. We find that families on a neuro-oncology journey, especially DIPG families and DMG families, come to us the earliest, because when their child is diagnosed, it's terminal. No questions, nothing. And so, you know, they want that support. They have accepted and acknowledged their child is going to pass away. You know, one of the questions we get is, well, how do I bring this up? When do I bring this up? When is someone appropriate for Zaxbridge? And there's not one hard and fast answer. I have a mom I've been working with whose child has had a brain tumor for 17 years, her entire life. She actually has recently started to have some difficulty, but I talk to her infrequently. She was not terminal at the time, but the number of times she's been in the hospital with her daughter and they said, we don't think your child's going to survive the night. She wanted to talk to someone else who'd experienced that, because sometimes you just want that reality check. You don't want that friend who's so well-meaning to say, oh, you can't think that way. Because as cancer parents, that's how we thought. You can't, you know, you can't help but think that. You can't help but go down that road because you've been on this journey for 5 months, 5 years, 10 years. And so that's our reality. And there are many times when the only other person I want to talk to is a bereaved parent. And sometimes it's not the other bereaved parent that's in this house. I want to talk to another mom that gets it and has lived it in the way that I have lived it. We are in the worst club ever. Sam, may we never teach you that handshake. Susan, the same. Karen, Sarai. But we have this secret handshake and it connects us. And so we know what it feels like. One of the things we didn't talk about was We try and support our peer mentors. We're very protective of them. We keep track of dates. Dates have a different meaning after you go through a cancer journey. And one of our peers asked us if there was a way that we could remind them of the important dates for their support seekers. And so we now have a mechanism where our peer mentors, if their support seeker has a birthday or an anniversary coming up, they're reminded 3 days before by text and on the day of, because we all know what it feels like when people start to forget those days. We also keep our peers' days in mind. I never try to match a peer mentor with a new support seeker around one of their days. Those days are sacred. As a bereaved cancer parent, I know how I feel on those days, and I would never expect someone to be able to hold space for another person on those days.
Right. And Sam, and Jen covered a lot. I want to add just a couple of quick things to it. I think your question's a great one, and it's a hard one, right? How do we get social workers as a primary referral mechanism aware of this understanding and also have the knowledge and courage to bring this up, right? And social workers have told us, and we've talked to a lot of them, they've struggled with it, right? Like we thought the floodgates were just going to open. And that first year was about building awareness and trust, right? And now it is really starting to happen here where but we are finding people, about 50% of our referrals come from social workers and 50% are coming from social media. But social workers need to know about this. And so we do briefings all the time, right? Overall, we just created a referral guide with social workers in mind to help them. What are the things you should listen for? What are the things you should look for? What should you say? And how do you refer? For this group, I just popped a link into it, into chat, right? Overall, I think this is really about, at the end of the day, we're focused on one-to-one peer support, but we're really focused on breaking down the barriers and resistance to making it okay to talk about grief and loss. And that takes time. That is not an overnight thing. So we'll go hospital by hospital and Sam, anybody you meet, hey, there's this great organization that does this thing and they can support people in Canada. It'd be great. Can we connect one social worker? We just connected with a social worker at a pretty large cancer hospital in the Midwest United States, and they came in with an attitude, I'll listen and then share it, maybe share it with my team, and they acted as a gatekeeper. But when they came out of the meeting, they're like, okay, I'm going to share it with my boss and this person and this person, and I know these two people that should be peer mentors. So it takes people to hear it multiple times to understand it and hopefully experience, and I hope this group feels it as well, the love and care that we've put into this, because it's such an important thing. Anytime anybody has a social worker in their hospital or a team, we'll talk to one person, we'll talk to 5 people. We'll do all of that. So great question, Sam, and sorry we took like 10 minutes to answer it.
Okay, thank you. It was a great question for sure. Anybody else have any questions for Jon and Jen about being a support seeker or provider or peer mentor? I mean, I think it's a great fit for OPAC because OPAC is all about that peer support. That's what we do. So we do want to support bereaved families because we always hear from this, what Jen just said, that after their child passes, the support a lot of times just drops away, right? And they feel alone. So we do want to support bereaved families. And I think this is a great way to do that with trained peer mentors, that one-on-one connection. Not everybody's ready for a support group, a big group, the one-on-one with somebody who gets it, right? It's so important. Do you match, I guess child cancer has no borders and everything, but do you match like a Canadian support seeker with a peer mentor in the US, or does it have to be in the same country? Or
great question. And when I was doing the intake a couple of days ago with our newest Canadian support seeker, the first person I thought of was our Canadian peer mentor, because they were, they're both in Ontario, their children were both treated sick kids. But then when I met this mom and I started to talk to her, and I did ask her, I said, would you like to be matched with another Canadian with a Canadian peer mentor. And she said, no, she said, I'd really like someone whose child was a similar age and who would be accepting of me. And so I matched her with someone who's in Missouri. And I actually got a text as we were talking, and she said, I love her. She's amazing. So, that's, I get sort of a feeling as I'm doing an intake with someone, and I always have to check availability and make sure, because peer mentors can always say no. Peer mentors can take time off if they need to take space from this. And I just, I don't know if that's my training or whatever, but I had a gut feeling that these two would connect well. And I was right. I'm going to be wrong. There have been a couple times I haven't been. In this case, one of the things that was important was some LGBT issues. And that was part of the accepting part. And so I knew that was a big deal. And there was also a question of someone being in recovery. And that is something that we are starting to match on when someone asks for it as well. I get a surprise, oh, you can do that each time. We've now trained at least 2 people who are in long-term recovery, who have so much experience in the peer world already. The mom the mom who's getting support is getting support through, I'm sure somebody on this call is going to know. I had never heard of it because it is not something we have in the US. Right to Heal, which is trauma-based addiction services, and that's where she gets her support. And she said, "Is that something you can match on?" I said, "Absolutely," because if anything's going to be a trigger, losing your child is certainly topping the list. And so knowing that that's someone. She's not the first support seeker who said to me, I felt so judged when I've tried to go to a support group. I feel like people look at me a certain way. They assume I'm going to start drinking again or whatever it is. And I just need someone who's going to accept me for who I am. And so having the ability to match on those things allows people to start having these really deep, meaningful conversations right away, because we're all used to telling our story about our child 1,000 times to different medical staff. And, you just want to actually connect with someone on a human level, not, vital signs and medications and diagnoses and everything else. And so at the end of the day, there are so many conversations where we just are sitting there and saying, I get it. I felt that way. The biggest part, there are 2 big things to being a peer. One is the ability to listen. A lot of our training goes into listening and how to listen and, ways of being an empathetic listener and how to have a conversation. The second is being responsive. We ask our peer mentors to answer a communication from their support seeker within 24 hours. That doesn't mean you meet with them, especially you have lives. That's, we get that. But just that you are answering that communication so they don't feel like they're sending something out into the ether and it's just going unnoticed, because we all know how that feels.
Right. So I just want to add one thing to that, right? I think your question's a good one. And yeah, and as Jen answered, we don't, we try to match based on what's going to help the individual the most. But I think that, the way that we think about it is grief doesn't have borders. Cancer doesn't have borders, right? Love doesn't have borders. So why would we?
Exactly. It's the human connection. So many things that people can connect on beyond, where your child was treated, basically, or the healthcare system or whatever. There's so many other things, points of connection, things in common. And like you said, grief, right? That's a human universal emotion. So yeah, it doesn't matter where they are anyway. So yeah, great. Thank you. And about the training, is there a cost to your training program for
There's not a cost to anything.
Okay.
I mean, somebody wanted to pay us, yeah, but no, there's nothing. Yeah, no, there's no cost. This is 100% free, right? This is, we actively are working to raise funds to support and grow this business, this organization, but the support seekers and peer mentors, are our peer mentors are volunteers, right? And if you're an active peer mentor, you're spending a couple hours a month, maybe. On this, but support seekers, this is connection. This is compassion, and that doesn't have a price.
Great. Any other questions for Jon and Jenn?
Sam will stay on all night.
I
We know
will.
Sam,
I
right?
know. I wish we could. I mean, I will. Okay, I won't take too much of your time, but I do have another question. Um, can you share some language for a non-bereaved parent who is friends and or in contact or meeting newly bereaved parents quite often through the connections that I make through my for anyone who doesn't know me, I connect a lot with oncology parents. Um, can you give some language that a non-bereaved parent can use to a newly bereaved parent, introducing them to Zaxbridge in a way that doesn't sound like I'm in a sensitive way that would land the way that I would intend it to land? I don't know I don't know the language, and I wonder if you have ways to share what you do coming from a non-bereaved parent.
Jen,
Oh, no,
you should
Jon,
go
I'm letting you
first.
go. Nope. You.
Oh, putting me on the spot. I mean, Sam, it's a
Yep.
great question as always. Um, I think it's largely, depends on how well you know them too, right? But I think if you know them, then you know a little bit of, how they're feeling. Maybe they've remarked they've felt isolated or lost or confused, right? Or angry, and say, hey, there's this great organization and they're providing one-to-one connections for parents that have lost. You don't have to say even that much, right? But like maybe they got peer support when their child was in treatment, right? But just saying, I don't know, or if you're not sure, you can say, I don't know if this would really be useful for you, but I know there's this great organization and they do one-to-one connections for parents that have lost a child to cancer. They're called Zaxbridge, and they're more, they're starting to have peer mentors and support seekers in Canada, and I think they could be of interest. And that's all you have to say. I don't think you have to say much more than that. Jen, would you agree with that?
Yeah, people will ask a similar question and say, "Well, how do I bring it up and not bring up the bereaved parent part?" Um, I think OPAC is just such a perfect connection point with that for for families in Ontario. That, hey, were you able to get support, peer support during your journey through OPAC? This is something similar, in a different part of the journey. But it's at least making that connection of the power of peer support. It's no different than the AA example.
Yeah.
Are you someone in recovery? Did you get your support through peer support? This is a similar organization that's focused in a very specific area. It's I think the more you say it, the easier it will get the easier it is to say it. It doesn't feel like I've changed my language at times with people. It's no different than as bereaved parents, like, how do you answer the question, how many children do you have? You come up with the more you do it, the more it gets comfortable. But it does go back to that whole concept of normalizing conversations about grief and death. We do not live in a world where today we are going to see so many of these horrible cancers cured. And so the reality is that children are going to continue to pass away. People can choose to ignore it. And I think that's part of it, is there is this discomfort around acknowledging that this happens. I have my term, I call it grief cooties, that people will look at you as a bereaved parent and it's like, well, if that freak thing could happen to them, because we all know that cancer is contagious. But it's like, that's the thing is that it's talking about it. And I know that there are people that are not, in our worlds that don't feel comfortable talking about it for whatever reason, but this is our reality. I think anybody who goes through a pediatric cancer diagnosis, you are a different person at the end of it. Regardless of what the outcome was, you are not who you were when you started. And a lot of times when I talk to a bereaved parent and we talk about trying to get back to your life, And I said, you are not the person you were before X date when your child was diagnosed with cancer. Whether your child survived or not, you are not that same person. And I don't think we acknowledge that enough about what we go through as parents, as human beings, about our journey. We're not the same parents we were before. Even if our children survive, we are not the same parents before. The number of times I tell people it's okay that you felt relief at the end because they feel this terrible guilt that, did they do something to hasten their child's death? Did they, because it was so difficult, because they laughed for a minute and they felt guilty that they laughed. And someone looks at them and like, how can you be laughing? Your child died. And that's one of the reasons why we do things like we brought Zach's social worker to one of our peer sessions, and he talked about this concept of both and, that it really is part of your grief journey at times, that you are going to laugh and cry at the same time. But no one teaches us that. It goes back to this whole concept that we don't have a word in our language that describes who we are. You lose a parent, you're an orphan. You lose a spouse, you're a widow or a widower. There's not an English word that describes bereaved parent the way those terms do. And people are afraid to talk about it. So if nothing else, if Jon and I do our job by getting people to not squirm every time we talk about a child dying, we've made a little bit of progress.
Right. And Sam, again, another great question, but I think bereavement, it may be a little bit easier, right? In pre-bereavement, where you don't know if they know if their child is terminal or not. You don't want to freak them out. Oh, there's an organization, because if you come to our website, you're going to figure out we're all bereaved. And yes, we're helping you at that end stage, right? But yeah, so it's you have to be careful, but I think I would pose that back to this group tonight. If you don't know Sam and Sam met you somewhere and said, "Oh, have you, you're telling me you're alone, and lost and confused. Have you ever tried, you may have a therapist, but there's a group of parents that can connect you with, and talk about these things as for someone that's gone through that. Would that be compelling to you? I'm curious what the other bereaved parents on this call think about that overall. Because this is just our opinion. So I don't know if anybody else has an opinion about that approach. Patricia or Stephanie or Jillian or Leslie, please don't feel obligated to talk, but I'm curious if anybody has an opinion.
I am not a bereaved parent,
Okay.
but to touch on Sam's question, I think very much why we're all here is the power of peer connection. And I tend to believe that when you lead with that peer connection, you are breaking down walls that people who don't have the lived experience cannot conquer. We've seen it in many spaces where you have parents that open up in places where they've never opened up in years, with therapists that they've sat with for hours and hours and hours, because you just cannot get to those spaces that you can get to when you have that lived experience or when you are in that peer-to-peer space. I'm a huge believer in that model. I think that we're just starting to touch the surface with this peer-to-peer model, and I think that there is a lot of pushback within the systems. So I think what you're doing is phenomenal, and I think Canada, OPAC, we're doing this, and we need to continue doing this because these are where parents feel supported. And this is where the change is going to happen and where it's going to happen at systems level. So, yeah, I think that's all that maybe lead with. Here's a peer organization, and you might just break down those walls that some other people
Absolutely.
can't. Yeah, just my 2 cents.
I think that was great.
Hi, this is Leslie. And I am a bereaved parent. And I think what might feel okay to hear is if the question was posed, do you feel like you're getting enough support? Do you feel supported? Because I didn't. I felt like I kept saying I'm looking for other, specifically parents who have lost children to cancer. These are all very specific, and I didn't want general bereavement. I didn't want, and so I think if you're in a conversation with someone, that would maybe be a nice way of saying it. And I also appreciate that it's just very difficult to talk about from the position that you're in, not being bereaved. I also can understand that that's also difficult. So.
But we have a friend and colleague who works for another pretty well known cancer nonprofit, and and she's built relationships. And Sam, I think there's a lot of similarities in what her daughter's a survivor, right? But she knows a lot of bereaved moms, right? And she knows as she builds those relationships with them, she says, hey, you should check this out. Jen just had a conversation with a bereaved mom that she referred who's going to become a peer mentor for us, right? It's just, some of it's you're working through your relationship, and it's also possible you could bring it up and someone gives you a look or doesn't want to talk to you ever again. But that if we don't keep trying, we're never going to break down those barriers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's Susan. And I think, sorry, go ahead, Patricia.
Sorry, no, you go ahead, Susan.
No, I was just going to say that because we do build sustained relationships with families from the outset, this is such a natural fit for us to be able to provide that continuum for families, because we know as parents that the more supports we can provide for them, the more direction, the more opportunities they can have, the more choice they can have, I think the better off potentially everybody is. And I think we do have an excellent palliative care team who we do work with. And they too have tried to expand the reach of their program so that it's not just about bereavement or pre-bereavement. It's about helping families truly in what palliative care is really about. So I think they would be and are very amenable to working with us on these kinds of initiatives. Sorry, Patricia, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to add, being a bereaved mom, when I was going through the pre-period with my son, I felt that there was nobody to talk to. I did have the palliative team there, but I didn't feel comfortable talking to them about that. And my lifeline was another mom whose son had passed away from a similar cancer, who had reached out to me and said to me, no matter what question you have, it's going to be something that I've already thought about. So I'm here for you to ask me whatever you need. And for me, that was, like I said, it was a lifeline. So I think having a mentor to speak to, I think for me would have been so valuable.
You had that mentor, right?
I did in an informal way. I did. And, to this day, I don't see her often. We've only met, we met in the hospital when our kids were being treated. And then it's sad because when her son passed, I was afraid because I knew that I was also in that same boat and eventually was going to be there. And then I was lucky that she reached out to me, and we still just once in a while we'll just send each other a little note like, love you, thinking of you, that sort of thing. And so, yeah, I can say full-heartedly, like this would be wonderful for other parents.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So I guess we'll wrap it up. And I do encourage everyone on here to go on zacksbridge.org. If you're seeking support, if you want to be a peer mentor, all the forums are there, all the information, resources, everything is on there. If you have any questions, to reach out to Jon and Jen. And check out our website, opapc.org, little plug at the end, for peer support. That's what we do with our parent liaisons in hospital or virtually like this every week. So yeah, thank you again, Jon and Jen, for a wonderful presentation, introducing our families to Zaxbridge and all the great work you're doing. And we do look forward to, as an organization, also working together with you to refer families, to let people, spread the word about Zaxbridge through our parent liaisons and so on. And yeah, to work together closer, hopefully in the future.
Well, thank you, Sarai, and everybody at OPAC for the start of a really hopefully impactful partnership. Thank you, Sam, for connecting the dots between our org and organization, and thank you to Leslie, Jillian, Stephanie, and Patricia for joining us tonight. We appreciate it, and yeah, we're all in this together. So let's keep working on it.
Thank you. All right, everybody, have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
Thank you so much.
you.
Nice to see you.
Yeah.